I think what the reason why we're here today is because we want to share something that we think has been really helpful to us, an understanding of how the mind works, essentially, and why that's important at this particular time. We recognize that people are having all kinds of feelings around what's happening. People are feeling at times peaceful, at times feeling anxious and genuinely frightened, and it comes and goes. It moves in and out of all sorts of different feelings. Fear about losing work, fear about potentially getting the virus itself, fear about other people being hurt and harmed within the family, and all kinds of areas that we might be concerned about. And as a gauge, what would be really helpful is to ask everybody that's viewing this to give us a number from 1 to 10, where 1 represents peacefulness and 10 represents the other extreme of high anxiety and fear. Where are you now at this moment in time in relation to that? So in the chat box, can you just put a number down? 1 to 10, where are you in this place? Just to give us an idea of where you're starting from. Okay, so at the moment we got 5, 2, 6, 4. Okay, 3, 5, there you go, okay. So from what we can see, no one's experiencing what we might call very high anxiety and great fear. So if the coronavirus, if this current situation had the power to affect us directly, then you could argue that we would all be coming up with more or less the same number. We would all be impacted the same way by this external situation. Now, I'm not denying the fact that it's happening. It's there, and it's very evident that it's happening. So that's a fact, but our perception of the facts is what we're talking about here, our experience of it. So if it had the power to affect us directly, then we would all be feeling the same. However, there are different perceptions of it, different experiences, as you've just demonstrated by putting those numbers up.
And those numbers would probably be different if we asked you in 24 hours.
Yeah, it fluctuates and might change from moment to moment, as it does. So what we're looking at here is, how is our experience created? Our moment by moment experience created? Well, it comes from perception. It comes from thought. In order for us to have an experience of any kind, about any situation, there must be some thinking attached to it. We must bring our own thought, our own perception to it, in order for it to give us an experience. That's how it works. It can't work from the outside in. It has to work from the inside out. So that explains, at least for me, why sometimes I feel very peaceful around this situation, and other times I can get quite anxious and worried, particularly about my family. And I start to notice that my whole experience changes as a consequence of some changing in my own thinking. So 100% of the time, we are experiencing our perception of any given circumstance. We're not experiencing the thing directly. The coronavirus, as strange as this might sound, or as powerful as this illusion can look to us, it doesn't have the power to make us feel anything. We have to bring our own perception to it for us to experience whatever feelings happen to move us in the moment. However, it's a very, very strong illusion. It looks like, and it's very real to us, that this thing out there is designed to frighten us, to make us anxious.
So it looks like we're experiencing the coronavirus, or it looks like we're experiencing our child tantruming, but we're not. We're experiencing our thinking about the coronavirus, and we're experiencing our thinking about our child tantruming. And that's going to change moment to moment.
And that's the beautiful thing about how this is. So we're stating a fact, essentially. Yeah, we're stating a fact of how things work, how the mind works, and how it doesn't work. So when we can see that our mind works a certain way, and we know that we're creating our moment-by-moment experience by thought, we also know that thought changes, always moves on. You know, if we leave it alone, it's changeable, it's variable. That's the nature of thought. You can go to bed one night of a night time and be caught up in some terrible anxious thoughts about the life, your circumstances. Maybe you haven't got enough money, maybe your children are really in a very upset place, or whatever it might be. And you can wake up the next day, the circumstances have not altered, but your perception of them is different. And what we've seen, and what I've seen very, very strongly, is that when my mind is quieter, when my mind is more peaceful, when I'm in a good state of mind, my outlook on the world changes. The world doesn't change. My outlook on it changes. And my capacity to meet it with greater clarity and with more common sense grows as a consequence. And resilience, which is something you've been talking a lot about already this evening, Nicole, we start to see our resilient nature. It's already within us. It's not something we have to cultivate and grow like I might be growing my vegetables in the garden. It's simply available to us when our minds are quieted, when we're not caught up in our fearful thinking.
And I think it's helpful to remember that if you have a fearful thought, you will have a fearful feeling. And if you have a happy thought, you'll have a happy feeling. If you have a surprise thought, you'll have the surprise feeling. You can't have a happy thought and feel sad, or vice versa. It doesn't work that way, thank heaven. So we have this very, very reliable source of information. The thought creates the feeling. We can really rely on that.
Yeah.
But the experience of thought it's transient, it's variable, it's like the weather. And this is why children are such amazing teachers, because your 2-year-old will have their tantrum and they'll be really happy, and then they'll be absolutely furious, and then they'll be sad, and then they'll be happy, and they can do that in 4 minutes. And it's been like chaos and a whirlwind, and off they run, happy as Larry, because they've had a new thought. Yeah, and as adults, we often find ourselves going, oh, I can't keep up, right? Because I'm still cheesed off that they were so angry, and we're trying to keep up and move on because we have more judgment about the thoughts and the feelings that we have. Children don't judge their thoughts and feelings. They don't ever think, should I tone down my tantrum? They're just feeling the full expression of this weather. And children are really fine with stormy weather. And as we become adults, we get more and more uncomfortable about the weather, and we try and control the weather, and it's like, that's the one thing we definitely can't control. We can't control our environment in that way. You have your friend, Mandy.
Oh yeah, no, we'll speak about Mandy just now, but I think this is what Micheal is bringing about. The feeling state is so important, because what we're describing is what happens naturally to us as human beings. In children, what we see is they naturally return to their well-being. Well-being is their essential nature. Well-being is our essential nature. That's who we are. Before, think about your youngest, your smallest baby, before they start to have any conditioned thinking about themselves and the world around them, they are peace, they are love, they are wisdom. That's who they really are. And then we start to think. And that's what we do as human beings. Of course we do. And we start to create our own narrative and our own stories about ourselves and about our world. And we believe those stories to be true because we feel them. Every thought we have, consciousness will give us the experience of it. That's how it works. But it doesn't make our thinking necessarily true. But what's our guide? What will guide us to see what our state of mind is in, and that's our feelings. So when we're feeling anxious and fearful, can we start to see those as positive reminders or positive pointers towards our own state of mind? Can we start to, rather than buy into the feeling and say something is wrong and I've got to change it, start to see that what this feeling is doing is telling me that right now there is some unhelpful thinking, some not helpful thinking. And it doesn't make sense to go down the rabbit hole and find out what the hell's going on, what should I do about it, how should I change it, because we have a natural reset system built into our psychology. In the same way that the body has a natural healing system, we have a natural reset system. So if we leave those thoughts alone and just notice that we're feeling out of sorts right now, we're out of alignment with our true nature. We leave it alone, and anxiety, like all feelings, soon will pass. Everything passes. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to analyze it, psychologize it, or even go necessarily see a therapist. I mean, sometimes that's helpful. But if we understand that our feelings are telling us something about our present state of mind, we simply leave it alone and ride this particular wave for a moment in time and know that we're okay. Know that our essential nature has not been disrupted, disturbed. That which is constant remains constant. We are peace. We are love. We are wisdom. We are well-being before we are our thinking. Back upstream. So if we know that we're okay and we return to okay, and we see the evidence of it everywhere in our children, and we've seen the evidence of it in ourselves when we look back over our lives.
The weather, the variable of the clouds and the mist, but the sun is like the constant. So sometimes you can't see the sun. You can't see your innate well-being or your resilience because you're caught in the thought storm. We get really distracted by the weather. It's such a powerful illusion that this is what reality is, these transient thoughts. But it doesn't mean the sun ever goes away. It doesn't ever go away. Nobody is broken. Like, we all have that default factory setting of innate well-being. Everybody, no exceptions.
There's no doesn't mean that just because there is a crisis happening in one's life that one has to feel anxiety, one has to feel fear. It's not a given that those two things go together. Only if we have fearful thoughts. We can only experience a situation fearfully because we're having fearful thoughts. That's the source of it.
And it's really human to have fearful thoughts. But it can be easy to feel identified with certain thoughts if we're having a lot of them. So we have a friend, Mel, who was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in her late teens, and she accepted that diagnosis. She said, well, it makes sense, because my mother has anxiety and depression, my aunt has anxiety and depression. This is just how it is. I've got anxiety and depression. And she decided then that she could never be a mother because her mind said, if you needed nappies, you couldn't go into a supermarket because supermarkets are too anxiety inducing. Therefore, you couldn't be a good mum, can't have children. So she was really attached to the idea that she was this anxious, depressive person, until one day somebody said to her, do you ever have other thoughts? And she realized, oh yes, like I'm really happy when I go to the beach, and I can have really romantic thoughts when I go out for dinner with my fiance, and I can feel really relaxed when I'm doing swimming or something. And then she realized that yes, she was having anxious thoughts, but she was also having happy, peaceful thought, the whole range. Like, we have this huge spectrum of human experience, every single emotion. And often what we do is we try to eliminate some of them. So we try to get rid of anxiety. We think we have to get rid of fear, but we can't, because the wonderful thing is that we have the full range of the piano. So we're going to play, that's the best way to get music, right? You have to have the full range. So we can't eliminate any of them. But what we can do is simply notice when they're passing through. And the simple noticing allows them, we stop identifying with them when we just notice. It's a bit like seeing someone on the other side of the street, and if that person was a thought, we can just go, oh hey, I recognise you. We've met before. Good to see you, and you carry on. But what we often do is we go, oh my gosh, and we rush over to them, and we engage in a conversation, and we feed that thought. Before we know it, we're in a great big thought storm, and our day is suddenly off track.
I think the key thing to outline here, to keep it really simple, which essentially it is simple, is that we always feeling our thinking. It's not possible to have a direct experience of the world outside. We have to have some perception, some thought to create that. And that's ever changing. That's a variable. So we're living within the hidden variable of thought. That's how humans operate. We have extraordinary capacity for imagination. We can create whatever story we want about anything, and we'll believe it. It will feel true to us, feel real. But that's in that capacity as human beings to imagine has created everything that we now know to be everything. It hasn't come from anywhere else. So it's a bit like we can watch our own frightening movie we're projecting onto the world until we realize that that's what we're doing. We're projecting a movie onto the world, and we're frightening ourselves in the process. We're always feeling our thinking 100% of the time. And feelings are there to guide us. They're there to tell us that right now, if I'm feeling discomfort, anxiety, depression, whatever it might be, that I'm out of alignment with my true nature in this moment in time, and to leave it alone. Do nothing.
But that in itself is mental health. Like even the anxious thoughts, the fearful thoughts, which is alerting us to the fact that we're out of alignment, that's health in action. That's a really useful feedback system.
So we needn't be frightened of our feelings. They're there to inform us. It's feedback, useful feedback. Yeah, you don't question. If you're feeling really good, you don't stop and think, oh gosh, why am I feeling so good? What's going on here? What should I do about this? Maybe I start to analyze what's going on. You just get on with it. You just do. So why question the feelings? Children don't question their feelings. They have them and they get on with it. They don't come back to you the next morning and say, Nicole, I think I need some therapy. She's 2 years old. And like, okay, where's that come from? They just get on with it. Now we have got some ideas, some thinking about what's good feelings, what's right. We have a lot of judgment around this stuff. And that's a bit like, standing on the side of a pond, and these thoughts and feelings are the ducks that come towards you, and we just feed them. Just keep feeding them with, oh my God, I shouldn't feel like this, or maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe because I had this conversation with Michelle this morning that didn't go so well, and you just keep feeding those thoughts. And of course, the ducks that stick around. More and more arrive, in fact.
You get some angry geese as well, normally.
And then you stop feeding the ducks. You just see it for what it is. I'm making up a story that looks and feels very real. But essentially, it is constructed by my mind. I'm watching my own film of my situation. And like all things, if you leave them alone, they will pass. It may be uncomfortable. But uncomfortable, as Micheal said, is just another feeling. No right or wrong about it. And then we can start to see that as our minds quieten, where we don't get tangled up in all this analyzing, judging, and everything else, our minds naturally quieten down. This is what our minds do. They reset. It's a bit like finding true north again. We just, okay, kind of know where the way forward is from here. Starts to quieten down. And the world starts to look differently. We start to see the same situation from a different perspective. Now, nothing's changed out there, but your capacity to see it is different, and your capacity to meet it is differently. And what we start to see is that how resilient we are. It starts to arise within us. And not only resilience, what we start to see is that that which is common to all of us as human beings starts to reveal itself. And that's kindness, that's love, that's generosity, that's support, that's the village feeling of, I'm looking at. These things happen naturally when our minds are not full of unhelpful thinking. When we're frightened, we look after ourselves and we protect ourselves. We defend. We push away. I know that happens on a kind of one-to-one level, or it happens on a broader level, you know, where there is a country defending itself from another. But that's fearful thinking running through us that we choose to believe in. The story that we're making up about our world is simply made up in this moment.
And there's nothing wrong with having fearful thoughts. Nothing wrong at all. It's just, like I said, it's part of that piano keyboard. So it's just a case of noticing and not feeding the ducks. It's the doing nothing. And it's strange, isn't it, that often doing nothing is harder than doing something. You know, we so want to do and fix and control, but the doing nothing. And I heard this great analogy today where we were saying, you know, for years we've looked at the climate crisis and we've said, well, we have to do this and we have to cut this, and if we can invent this, and then we can fix it. And what happened? Right now, we're doing absolutely nothing. And what's happening? It's like the doing nothing is where things organically appear, where the solutions organically arise.
Yeah, nature is taking care of itself. Nature is doing what nature does, and we are part of that nature. We're no different. You know, when we cut our hands, you know, the body heals. We don't go around trying to make it work or interfering with that. We simply let it heal according to its nature. That's what we do. And we're designed in the same way as human beings. It is in our nature for us to come back to a place of well-being. That is our essential nature as human beings. And when it comes to parenting, if we can see that that's who our children are, if their well-being is inbuilt, if their resilience is inbuilt, if we can see that they don't need fixing because nature, they are nature and they take care of seeing themselves through into what's right for them. They see that for themselves. They learn for themselves. When we can see that, we can start to pull back a little bit and start to see that we're not actually responsible for their happiness. It's not our job to make them happy. Their happiness happens within them, as does unhappiness, as does fear, as does anxiety. We can't change that, but we can provide a loving environment. Like a gardener, you tend to the soil. You look after the soil and let the tree grow according to its nature. But you look after the soil in the environment that the child can grow in. That feels to me like our responsibility as parents, to bring a loving environment, a supportive, light-hearted environment in which you see their true nature evolve.
And the beautiful thing is that children know who they are. And a colleague of ours went into a primary school. She went into a class. The children were 4 and 5 years old. And she went in with the question, who are you really? And the kids had this conversation. She just kept going, okay, but who are you really? And she got them down to 5 words where they all agreed that these 5 words are the words that described who they really were. And she didn't offer them any words as suggestions. She didn't steer them in a particular direction. She just kept asking, who are you really? The 5 words that these 4 and 5-year-olds came up with, they said that they were love, intelligence, power, strength, and wisdom.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So isn't it amazing? If children know this and we look like we've forgotten, I think that must be quite disconcerting. So when we show children that we know this too, that we know that's who they are, and that's also who we are, then how exciting, how beautiful for the child to know that.
Michael, Michelle, I want to thank you very much. There's some key things in there that I'd like to pull out for everybody. I think the biggest thing that has helped me along my parenting journey, and I think along my spiritual and emotional growth, was coming to a place where I didn't just know intellectually, but I can feel it within my body, that how I feel has nothing to do with what's happening on the external. For a long time, I was the Miss Fix-It, wanted to fix everybody and just get everybody right. And that obviously meant that everybody should behave the way I would, because obviously that's the way that the world would work if it was perfect. And that just takes you in nuts. And I think one of the fundamental things to take away from this conversation is that how you feel is always, no exceptions, no matter what's happening around you, always a result of how you're thinking and nothing else. And I love the fact that you're saying resilience resides within. I think the reason we get trapped in doing, and this is why it's important to analyze your own parenting journey, is because as parents, we make our kids feel like they've made us feel a particular way. Yes. I'm angry because you've made me feel angry, so now you fix it so I won't be angry. I'm sad because you did that, fix it, so now I won't be sad. And I think we get trapped in that cycle of having to do something rather than just sit with our feelings. But the important thing, I think there's a gateway to our resilience. As it resides within, I think the gateway is to get comfortable with our pain. And to just be able to sit and hear what the message is. And that's really difficult because we're not in the mode of it, and it's so uncomfortable. You want to do something to get rid of it. But I think if we can practice, and it is a practice, of sitting each time your pain comes up and really saying, what am I supposed to learn here? What are you trying to tell me about the way I'm thinking or the way I'm seeing this situation? That's where you tap into your resilience. So thank you very much, Michelle and Michael.
And I just add one thing to what you said about when we see our children behaving a certain way and we respond, oh, you just made me really angry. I wanted just to emphasize here that when it looks to us that way, when it looks like something on the outside is causing us to feel something on the inside, we do it from an innocent place.
Absolutely.
The misunderstanding of how it works. So none of this is intentional. We don't go out to do this in a harmful way. It's an innocent misunderstanding of how it works. It never works from the outside in, always from the inside out. So that gives us a little bit of breathing space, that it's, oh, I just saw it the wrong way, if you like. I just feel it the wrong way, that's all. Now, when you start to see it, how it really works, then notice what happens to your relationships. Notice how they change as a consequence.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We're all about sharing and supporting this village. So if you found value in this episode, be sure to share it with your family and friends. And remember, this is a weekly show. So if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you'll be notified of our next episode. As we always say in the village, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, empower us. Until next time.